Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Inspired Action, where we dive into the most pressing leadership challenges and hope to inspire you to take a more coach-centered and people-focused approach to leadership. I'm your host, Kyle Pertuis, and it's time to get started with our three amazing guests for today. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Inspired Action. I'm your host, Kyle Pertuis, and I am here with three incredible guests today to answer this question. If the best leaders subtract behaviors, habits, and distractions that dilute their impact, how have you done this and been successful with it when most people are adding goals during this time of year? But first, let me do a quick introduction to our three guests today, beginning with Sandra Scaiano. Sandra is a web designer, SEO specialist, Kajabi expert, and all-around high-energy entrepreneur, helping her clients see possibility for the brand and developing their presence and customer connection online through web design, brand strategy, and behind-the-scenes support. In Holland, talent development strategist, organizational and learning development subject matter expert, leadership and performance coach, member of Forbes Coaches Council, adjunct professor, author, and speaker. Hold on, I got to come up for air. And in her spare time, she is semi-retired. Say all that again. And then finally, Dr. Rosie Bumgardner holds her Ph.D. in organizational leadership from the University of Oklahoma, 35 years of experience in education. She is an author of the children's book, Five Birdies, owner and chief baker at Harvest Moon Bakery, and the founder and CEO of Inspiring Optimism, a consulting business where she uses her expertise to empower leaders and educators to tap into their agency, confidently move forward for meaningful outcomes. Rumor has it, if you ask Dr. Bumgardner to speak, she's liable to bring cookies to the show. So I'm just saying, I'm not getting any cookies. You're about to speak, but we're going to let this one slide, Doc. All right.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you. Yes.
Sandra drew the short end of the stick with us this morning. So, Sandra, we're going to let you start off. And again, the question, we find that many leaders this time, and many people in general, I think, are adding goals this time of year. What are your thoughts on the statement that says the best leaders subtract behaviors, habits, and distractions that dilute their impact? And then tell us a little bit about how you've applied that.
Sure. It's great to be here. Thank you. Well, this question really hits home for me because I have learned over the years that leadership is about doing less on purpose. Right now, I'm reading The One Thing by Gary Keller, and the book talks a lot about, your best chance to succeed at anything you want is to go small. And going small is ignoring all the things that you could do and really just focusing on what you should do to move yourself forward. So for me, that idea of going small really resonates, and it's how I do my work and how I lead, because not all tasks really should get the same attention, really. Like leadership requires deciding which actions actually move the needle and then protecting time and being able to give time to those things. So, I come a lot from the marketing side, and, it's really important for me personally to know what software is working, what tactics are working, like how am I going to help my clients reach their goals? So, I bring a lot of ideas to the table, and I have to really worry about shiny object syndrome. And that's something that I've battled with, especially in software and things like that, right? So, one of the things that I've had to subtract is that habit of chasing everything, chasing after the new thing. Like what you have may already be working. And a lot of times it is. And you don't need all those bells and whistles. So, what I've really done is shifted, and I'm a lot more ruthless about focus now. I still educate myself about what's out there and what tools I can use for my clients, but I remove a lot of distractions now, like those unnecessary initiatives or the researching everything, and a lot of good ideas too. They get kind of moved to the side, they get subtracted as well. Just everything now is about a focus of that core goal. Does it support that core goal? And a lot of times I'm a buffer to my clients as well from those distractions. So, really what I found is that leaders protect the things that matter most, and when you do that, your teams move faster, your decisions, they get easier to make, and you get the results that you want, and then you can compound those. So for me, it's a lot of the impact that I'm making leadership wise comes from that subtraction.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I heard someone once say that leaders who scale fastest aren't the ones doing more. They're the ones that are doing less of what doesn't matter. Right. And so I think that focus that you're talking about really helps you kind of lock in on what matters today. Right. How singular focus, how do I narrow it down? And I'm curious on your perspective as well, right? If the best leaders subtract behaviors, habits, distractions that dilute impact, what is it about this statement that you align with and maybe even that you've applied successfully?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, first of all, Kyle. And, I really think that the best leaders prioritize adding positive habits rather than merely subtracting negative habits. I think leadership revolves around setting goals and tackling challenges with a positive attitude, which involves shifting from a negative subtracting perspective to a adding to a positive perspective. So I really think it's that shift of mindset from negativity, subtracting to positivity, and adding new habits, new ways of doing business, new ways of behaving. So I really think effective leaders have a process that they need to follow when they're setting goals. And I think it starts with defining your purpose. What is that goal that's going to spark that intrinsic motivation? And then from there, moving into setting your intention. What mindset is going to move you to positive behaviors, and then taking stock, taking inventory. What's going on with me that may inhibit me or hinder me from getting accomplished what I want to accomplish. Sometimes that means soliciting your team and other leaders and your peers, and maybe a 360 review to say, what are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? What's going to get in the way of me getting these goals accomplished? And then replace versus subtract. I think that I just don't, I think the word subtract to me is just feels too negative. So I like to say, put it in a more positive spin and just say, focus on new habits and new behaviors that will help to align and get you to your goals. And then, I think retraining your brain. I think neuroscience is telling us that we can create new neural pathways and form new default habits. And I think that's an important part of the process. And then, of course, I think staying on track, making sure that you are approaching it, adjusting whatever those goals are for you to stay on track. So for me, I think a good illustration of how I was able to take those elements of purpose and setting intentions and mindset and developing new habits and support system was really about when I was writing a book. I mean, I really had a very significant purpose, and that was going to be to help people to achieve the desired results that they were hoping to achieve. And then I set my mindset and my intention. I said, okay, what is that going to look like? How does that, I created that image in my head. What is that going to look like? And what's going to be the meaningful milestones for me so that I can stay on track? And then from there, I really took an inventory of what's going to get in my way, some self-reflection. What is prohibiting me, or what could prohibit me from getting to where I needed to get to? And then the last, I think, part of that process that I put into place was really to create a support system. If I did veer off track and, I had people around me that were going to motivate me, inspire me if I got frustrated. So keeping that alignment. So really going at it, I think leadership is more than just removing obstacles. It's really about setting yourself up for success and following a process and really specifically outlining how you're going to accomplish those goals with new behaviors and very effective patterns of operating. And I just, I think I'll just, one comment that I think is important to keep in mind all the time is sometimes small intentional changes can add up to the best results at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, no question. We always say similarly, right? It's the consistent application of those small steps. It's going to build the momentum that you want. Yeah. And I agree. And I think even as you describe kind of that process, part of that process early on for you, even with the more positive intent, and this is the purpose and the direction I'm going, is to take the time to evaluate what those potential obstacles are so they never creep in, right? Therefore, from that approach, there's no need to subtract them because we're aware of them as we get going, right? Yeah, I love that. Rosie, bring it home for us. What would you add, with that statement, best leaders subtract behaviors, habits, distractions that dilute impact, and how has it shown up for you as success?
Absolutely. First of all, again, thank you so very much for having me on your show and on your podcast. In regards to what would leaders, in regards to subtracting, I agree 100% with Sandra and with Ann. Absolutely. I want to start off by first saying that goals are good. Adding goals are good because that just shows a desire to continue to improve, a desire to continue to evolve and do better. And so goals are good. That being said, as was mentioned, I think a critical step in achieving those goals is indeed the process that we use to get there. Great leaders are able to itemize their time, to be strategic about their movements forward. So again, it's yes, we may add those goals, but we create a momentum that leads us towards that overarching goal. If we can think of it in that way, that we have this overarching goal that we're going to try to achieve, and underneath that overarching goal, we have all these objectives. I like to call them objectives. Keep in mind, my background is education, and so we achieve these different objectives, each in and of itself contributing one step forward to that overarching goal. When I think of some of the greatest leaders out there, for example, or people that achieved something magnificent, it was that laser focus. So it's using that momentum, and we use that momentum to help us create clear objectives. And those objectives then help us be more strategic about the use of our time. Think of, for example, Leonardo da Vinci. It took him over 10 years to paint the Mona Lisa, one of the most amazing paintings that's out there. But that laser focus, things came into play. Yes, of course they do. But it's about that leader being able to discern what will and will not help me reach my ultimate goal. I also think of people like Ernest Shackleton, the Arctic explorer whose ship, the Endurance, was surrounded by ice, eventually crushed in. His main goal originally was to do the first land crossing across the Antarctic. Well, that totally changed. And so we had to redirect and repivot. And so our new goal was then to create the survival, the safety and the survival of his men. And so every day he woke up with, what is my intention now? How can I keep, the men safe and ultimately get back to the mainland? And so staying clearly focused on that goal, athletes, for example, who are preparing for the Olympics, that laser focus on that overarching goal and all those others that kind of fall in underneath that to bring us one step closer. In a nutshell, I'd say it's about working smarter and not harder. We don't necessarily always want to tackle on more and tackle on more and tackle on more and tackle on more, because I'm that way too. If I want it done right, I'm going to do it myself. But I've learned strategies. And so if you will think of a toolbox, strategies to help me delegate, to help me prioritize. Those are some things that, that I would share in regards to what helps me get to that overarching place. I used to teach a class on study skills, and one of the lessons was 7 habits of homework success, and one of those is avoid those distractions. And so again, in the same way, it's about that momentum. It's about strategically moving forward by budgeting your time in a manner that moves you closer to that overarching goal. And as Anne shared, that process, make sure that process takes you closer and closer to achieving what it is that you try to accomplish.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you think about, you use the word momentum, and I think we all agree that goals can be a good thing, an important thing, right? Whether you want to call them goals, intentions, objectives, however you want to use the thousands of processes that are out there. Momentum doesn't come from piling those goals on, right? I think it really comes from being able to be focused and remove the friction that prevents us from executing on the things that matter. And I think that's what I think all three of you have said. How do you distinguish between being busy and being effective? Right. So like when these things that we don't, Anne's perspective, we don't want to call these subtracting or distractions, but you know what? The phone rings. So how do you distinguish between being busy and being effective when everything feels important? What are your thoughts on that question?
I mean, I would just say that it starts with prioritizing, what is going to be most important for you to accomplish and why, having that meaning to a link to why you're doing it. So that keeps you focused. I think that's an important thing. And Dr. Bumgardner said that earlier, is that laser focus, that way you're not distracted and getting busy with things that maybe aren't as important. But, I think there's also time that it's okay to let your brain just sort of freewheel. And sometimes that means doing something that's different than focusing on a specific goal. And that gives your brain a chance to rest and maybe re-energize itself. So when you go back to that goal and go back to what you're focused on, you feel more energy to do it. So being busy, being focused, I think getting it done, being effective means staying focused, setting your goals, your priorities, but allowing yourself also a little bit of time just to let that freewheeling, I'm just going to be distracted for a minute and do this.
Yeah. And I would also say, I think when you say prioritizing, that's kind of that easy answer to say, oh, well, if you feel like you've got so much going on, you're not sure what you should be focused on, you just prioritize it, right? And you can use one of these 8,000 methods to do that. But to the point you made about giving yourself freedom to be distracted, I think we also need to remember we can give ourselves freedom to back out and really prioritize, like really look at these things and say, okay, what is it about this, subset of things that I'm trying to multitask, which we know is ineffective, that's really important right now. And whatever that means, to think through it. And I think we see that a lot. People just don't take the time to think strategically that way in order to know where to focus. So I love that you brought those two things up.
Yeah,
Rosie, Sandra, go ahead.
I was just going to build on what you said. The same idea of you really need to think about your goal and break it down into those steps as well. So, I really go back to paper and pen and have that written down. So like, when you are distracted or when you are taking a break, then you can come back into it and know where to pick up. And it also goes back to what Dr. Rosie was talking about earlier with momentum, because you're able to cross things off your list. And that gives you that, that energizing feeling where you're building momentum because you've broken the steps down. It isn't too much at once type of thing. So,
yeah. Yeah. Rosie, what would you add?
Yes, I would say absolutely. When you said checking those things off your list, I was smiling because I am a list kind of gal. And if by the end of the day, the 10 things that I have on my list, there are still 10 things that need to be achieved, then I was busy during the day. And like you just said, Kyle, it's about taking a step back and looking at the way I'm working. Again, we go back to the process. Is what I'm doing achieving number one, number two, number three, number four? I think I come from that mindset of in a classroom. And, I started teaching when we had 6 class periods. And within those 6 class periods, I was needing to do A, B, C, D, E. And by the time the class period was over, we had all those goals done. And I think I still work in that fashion where I only have a limited time to get a certain amount of things done. And so I need to make sure that staying busy can be a very psychological trick, meaning you're busy, you're getting things done, but in the end, you really are not. And so it's about holding yourself accountable to those things that you do have on your to-do list and making sure and taking that pause. Oops, I still need to do this. Oops, I still need to do that. And actually getting them done. So again, back to that process, that reflecting on, let me see what I've gotten done so far, and readjusting time, resources, people, what have you, so that you do get that one little thing done, or those 10 things on your list. Because again, staying busy can be a trap in a way, because we think we're getting things done when in reality we're not. So it takes that reflective piece and that strategic planning to know I need to make more progress.
Yeah, I've heard it said busy is a feeling and effective is a result, right? I think we can think about those things, and we all know what it feels like to be busy. And I don't know that any of us would describe it as fulfilling, right? Sometimes it feels like we're accomplishing something because there's a lot of plates spinning, right? But it's not. It may evolve into more of hoping they don't crash than it is making sure they get to where they're supposed to go. Yeah. All right, you guys. Well, hey, thank y'all so much. That's all the time we had for today. We appreciate everybody out there watching. Be sure to tune in on LinkedIn every Thursday at noon for new episodes. and then anytime on our YouTube channel at MindFit Coaching. Thanks again for joining us, ladies. We'll see y'all soon. That's a wrap for another edition of Inspired Action, the Leadership Forecast. We're so grateful for our guests today and the impact they're making with the work they do. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel to watch the longer version of this episode, and be sure to like, comment, connect with, and follow me and each of our guests. You'll find all of our links in the caption of this video. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in every Thursday at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern for new episodes.